The stars looked different when you knew someone was coming to take everything away. Captain Kim Dae-ho stood on the bridge of the UNS Horizon, staring at the massive ships that had appeared in Earth's orbit 3 hours ago. They were huge, each one bigger than anything humans had ever built. There were hundreds of them, blocking out the stars like a swarm of metal locusts. "Captain, they're broadcasting again," said his communications officer, her voice shaking. She was young, maybe 25, and this was supposed to be a routine patrol mission. Instead, they were witnessing the end of human independence. Dae-ho nodded. "Put it through." The alien's face filled the screen. It had 4 eyes, gray skin that looked like stone, and a mouth full of teeth that seemed designed for tearing meat. When it spoke, a computer translated its words into flat, emotionless English. "Humans of Earth, I am Commander Thraken of the Velkran Dominion. Your planet is now property of the Dominion. You have 72 hours to surrender all military assets and accept integration into our empire. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your world. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact." The screen went dark. Dae-ho looked at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders, waiting for hope. He had none to give them. "Take us back to Earth," he said quietly. "We need to talk to the Admiral." Back on Earth, Park Ji-woo sat in the United Nations building, surrounded by every important person humanity could gather on short notice. Presidents, generals, scientists, and diplomats filled the room. Everyone was talking at once, and nobody had any good ideas. "We could negotiate," someone suggested. "Offer them resources in exchange for autonomy." "We could fight," said another. "Go down with dignity." "We could run," said a third. "Evacuate who we can and scatter across the galaxy." Admiral Lee Hee-jin stood up, and the room fell silent. She was 70 years old, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen 3 wars. She looked tired, but her voice was steady. "We can't negotiate with nothing to offer," she said. "We can't fight ships that could destroy continents. We can't run fast enough or far enough. We have 12 defense cruisers. They have 300 warships. We have conventional weapons. They have technology we don't even understand." Park Ji-woo leaned forward. She was the chief diplomat, and she had spent 20 years trying to prepare humanity for first contact. She had imagined 1,000 different scenarios. None of them looked like this. "So we surrender," she said. It wasn't a question. The room erupted in angry shouts. "Surrender? Humans didn't surrender. Humans fought. Humans never gave up." Admiral Lee raised her hand, and slowly the noise died down. "Yes," she said. "We surrender. But not the way you think." She walked to the front of the room and pulled up a display. It showed Earth's solar system, with all the human colonies marked in blue. Mars, the moon, the asteroid belt, the mining stations around Jupiter, hundreds of thousands of people spread across billions of kilometers. "They expect us to fight," Admiral Lee said. "They expect speeches about freedom and brave last stands. They expect us to be stupid, so we don't do any of that. We surrender quietly, we accept their terms, we become model prisoners, and we buy time." "Time for what?" someone asked. Admiral Lee's eyes went cold. "Time to learn. Time to prepare. Time to become strong enough that we never have to bow again." Park Ji-woo understood immediately. "We play dead." "Exactly," said the Admiral. "We go silent. We make ourselves so boring, so compliant, so utterly harmless that they stop paying attention. And while they're looking away, we work." The plan was risky. It meant years, maybe decades of living under alien rule. It meant humiliation. It meant watching the Velkrans treat humans like slaves and doing nothing. It meant gambling everything on the hope that humanity could catch up technologically before the aliens noticed what they were doing. But it was the only plan that didn't end with Earth as a smoking ruin. The vote was unanimous. 72 hours later, Park Ji-woo stood in front of Commander Thraken. The alien looked even more frightening in person, towering over her by almost a meter. Behind him, Velkran soldiers in black armor lined the walls of what used to be the UN Security Council chamber. "We accept your terms," Ji-woo said. Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that. Thraken's 4 eyes studied her. "No speeches? No defiance? How disappointing. I expected more from a species that calls itself intelligent." Ji-woo said nothing. She just bowed her head and waited. "You will dismantle all military vessels," Thraken said. "You will cease all weapons research. You will provide laborers for our mining operations. You will not attempt to develop faster-than-light travel. You will not create artificial intelligence. You will not communicate with other species without our permission. Do you understand? We understand, Jiwoo said. Good. You are now subjects of the Velcran Dominion. Try not to disappoint us more than you already have. Thraken turned and walked away, his soldiers following him like shadows. When they were gone, Jiwoo allowed herself one moment of rage. Her hands clenched into fists, her teeth ground together, and she imagined what it would feel like to put a bullet through Thraken's smug face. Then she took a deep breath and let it go. Later. There would be time for revenge later. The next year was the hardest of her life. Velcran overseers arrived on every human world, watching everything, controlling everything. Human ships were dismantled. Human weapons were destroyed. Human pride was crushed under alien boots one day at a time. Captain Kim Dae-ho was forced into early retirement. His ship was cut apart for scrap metal. He watched it happen, standing in the cold rain at the lunar shipyard, and felt something die inside him. But Admiral Lee Hee-jin didn't die. She disappeared. The official story was that she had a heart attack and passed away quietly in her sleep. There was a small funeral. Park Ji-woo gave a sad speech about loss and memory. In reality, Admiral Lee was on Mars, in a facility buried 3 kilometers under the surface where the Velcrans never bothered to look. 5 years passed. The Velcran garrison on Earth grew comfortable. Humans were boring. They followed orders. They worked in the mines without complaint. They produced food and materials on schedule. They never caused trouble. The Velcran High Command reduced their forces in the Sol system from 300 ships to 30. Then from 30 to 10. Finally, they left just one observation station in orbit and a few hundred soldiers on the surface. Watching humans was the worst assignment in the Dominion. Nothing ever happened. That was exactly what Admiral Lee had been counting on. Deep in hidden bases across the solar system, in asteroid tunnels and underwater facilities and caves on distant moons, humanity was working. Every piece of Velcran technology they could steal or salvage was taken apart and studied. Every sensor reading, every scan, every observation was recorded and analyzed. And slowly, painfully, humans began to understand. They learned how Velcran shields worked. They learned how Velcran weapons functioned. They learned the principles behind faster-than-light travel. And once they learned, they began to build. Not copies of Velcran technology. Something better. Something the aliens wouldn't see coming. Park Ji-woo kept playing her role. She met with Velcran administrators and smiled and bowed, and pretended to care about mining quotas and production schedules. She filed reports that were deliberately boring, filled with statistics and complaints about equipment failures and worker efficiency. The Velcrans barely read them. Captain Kim Dae-ho had been recruited by Admiral Lee. His retirement was cover for his new job, coordinating the resistance. He traveled between hidden facilities carrying messages that couldn't be sent electronically, organizing the thousands of people working on the secret project. At night, he dreamed about his ship, about flying free among the stars without anyone's permission, about the day when humans would stop pretending to be weak. That day was coming, but not yet. Not quite yet. Humanity's silence continued, and in that silence, something dangerous was growing. 10 years after the surrender, Choi Min-ho stood in a laboratory that didn't officially exist. It was buried under 500 meters of ice on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The walls were lined with equipment that the Velcrans thought had been destroyed years ago. Above his head, kilometers of frozen water hid them from any sensor the aliens might point in their direction. "Run the simulation again," Minho said to his team. He was a thin man with glasses that kept sliding down his nose and hands that were always covered in chemical stains. Before the surrender, he had been designing civilian spacecraft engines. Now he was building something that could change everything. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a small ship jumping to faster than light speed. The numbers on the screen made Minho smile for the first time in weeks. "It works," said one of his engineers, a woman named Kim Yuri. "It actually works. We just made a drive that's 30% faster than anything the Velcrans have." Minho nodded slowly. "Don't celebrate yet. Faster means nothing if we can't build enough of them. How many ships can we equip with this? At our current production rate? Maybe 50 in the next 2 years. Not enough. We need hundreds. Get me a meeting with Commander Kang. We need more resources." Commander Kang Sora was on the other side of the solar system, inspecting a construction site hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid. She floated through the darkness in a pressure suit, watching welding sparks fly as workers assembled the frame of a warship. But this wasn't a normal warship. It was smaller than the Velcron cruisers, built for speed and stealth rather than raw power. Every surface was covered in experimental materials designed to absorb sensor waves. The weapons were compact but devastating, using principles that humanity had stolen and improved. "How many more can we hide here?" Kang asked the foreman. "Maybe 15 if we're careful. Any more and the mass readings might look suspicious if the Velcrans scan this sector." Kang nodded. She was 40 years old with short black hair and scars on her hands from when a plasma conduit had exploded during an early test. She had joined the resistance on the day Earth surrendered, and she hadn't stopped working since. "Then we find more asteroids. More moons. More places where we can build without being seen." She turned to face the half-finished ship. "We've been quiet for 10 years. When we speak again, I want our voice to be very loud." Back on Earth, Yoon Tae-hyung sat in a small apartment in Seoul, staring at 3 computer screens. To anyone watching, he looked like a low-level administrator working late on boring paperwork. In reality, he was one of the most dangerous people in the solar system. Tae-hyung ran the Human Intelligence Network. He had spent 10 years recruiting people who worked for the Velcrans. Translators, janitors, cooks, technicians. People the aliens barely noticed. People who could listen and watch and report everything they learned. He knew the Velcrans' shift schedules. He knew their supply routes. He knew which commanders were lazy and which ones were paranoid. He knew where every Velcran soldier was stationed, from Earth to the outer colonies, and most importantly, he knew they had stopped paying attention. His phone buzzed. A message from one of his agents. "Garrison commander drunk again. Bragging about easy posting. Says humans are the most boring species in the Dominion." Tae-hyung allowed himself a cold smile. "Perfect, let them think that. Let them get comfortable." He typed a response. "Keep listening. Report anything about fleet movements in nearby systems." The message was encrypted 3 times and routed through 17 different servers. The Velcrans would never find it. They weren't even looking. Admiral Lee Hee-jin was older now, her hair completely white, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She sat in a command center on Titan, Saturn's largest moon, reviewing reports from across the solar system. Minho's team had cracked faster than light. Technology, good. Kang's fleet construction was ahead of schedule, excellent. Tae-hyung's intelligence network was providing detailed information about every Velcran in the system. Perfect. But the most important piece was still missing. She pulled up a file marked Operation Silence. It contained the complete plan for what would happen when humanity finally stopped being quiet. Every target was identified. Every attack was timed. Every variable was accounted for. In theory, they could eliminate every Velcran in the Sol system in a single day. In theory, none would escape to warn the Dominion. In theory, humanity would have weeks or months to prepare before the aliens realized what had happened. But theory and reality were different things. One mistake, one survivor, one lucky escape, and Earth could face the full might of the Velcran Dominion. They needed to be absolutely sure. Captain Kim Dae-ho visited her that evening. He looked older too, with lines around his eyes and gray in his hair. But he moved like a man with purpose, and that was enough. "The pilots are ready," he told the Admiral. "I've been training them personally. Every one of them knows their ship, their target, and their mission. They won't fail. They better not," Lee said quietly, "because if they do, everyone dies. Every human in the system, possibly every human alive." Dae-ho nodded. "They know what's at stake." "We all do." Lee stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see Saturn's rings glowing in the distant sunlight. Beautiful, peaceful, completely indifferent to the tiny humans planning war in the shadow of a moon. 12 years, she said. 12 years of bowing and scraping and pretending to be weak. 12 years of watching them treat us like animals. "I'm tired, Dae-ho. I want to stop pretending." "Soon," Dae-ho said. "Minho says the last ships will be ready in 6 months. Kang says her fleet will be fully operational in 8. Tae-hyung has confirmed that the Velcron garrison is at minimum strength. Everything is coming together. And Park Ji-woo? Still playing her role. The Velcrans love her. They think she's the perfect example of a compliant human." Lee laughed, but there was no humor in it. Poor fools. They have no idea what we've become. Park Ji-woo was having dinner with a Velcran administrator named Gruel. He was young for a Velcran, only 50 years old, and he had been assigned to Earth because he was considered incompetent by his superiors. A boring post for a boring officer. The mining output is down again, Grull complained, drinking something that smelled like cleaning fluid. Can't you humans do anything right? Jiwoo smiled apologetically. I'm so sorry, Administrator. There was an equipment failure in Sector 7. We're working to fix it as quickly as possible. Always an excuse, Grull muttered. Sometimes I think your entire species is just lazy. Perhaps you're right, Jiwoo said, pouring him another drink. We're not as advanced as the Velcrons. We do our best, but we have limitations. Grull nodded, satisfied. This was what he expected to hear. Humans admitting their inferiority. Humans accepting their place. He didn't notice that Jiwoo's smile never reached her eyes. He didn't notice that she was recording every word he said. He didn't notice anything except his own reflection in the bottom of his glass. Later, after Grull had stumbled back to his quarters, Jiwoo sent the recording to Taehyung. It contained detailed complaints about shipping schedules and patrol routes. Information that would be very useful very soon. Then she went home to her small apartment and allowed herself to feel angry. For 10 years she had smiled and apologized and pretended to respect creatures she despised. For 10 years she had played the role of the defeated human, grateful for alien mercy. But she remembered everything. Every insult, every casual cruelty. Every time a Velcran had treated a human like property, she remembered, and soon they would be reminded that humans never forget. In secret bases across the solar system, thousands of people worked through the night. Engineers built ships, soldiers trained in zero gravity, scientists perfected weapons that the Velcrans had never imagined. Intelligence agents gathered the final pieces of information needed to make the plan work. And in the darkness between worlds, hidden fleets grew larger. 50 ships, then 70, then 100. Small and fast and deadly, painted black to blend with the void, equipped with technology that was no longer just stolen but improved and perfected. The Velcrans noticed nothing. Their sensors swept across the solar system and saw only boring humans doing boring work. Their intelligence reports showed a species that had accepted defeat and moved on. Their commanders yawned and filed paperwork and counted the days until they could request a transfer to somewhere more interesting. They had no idea that they were already dead. They just hadn't stopped breathing yet. Admiral Lee Heejin set the date, 18 months from now. That was when the silence would end. That was when humanity would stop being patient. That was when the Velcrans would learn what happens when you give humans time to prepare. The Velcran observation station orbiting Earth had become the most boring posting in the entire Dominion. Lieutenant Greth sat in the command chair, reviewing the same reports he had been reading for the past 6 years. Human mining output adequate. Human population stable. Human compliance exemplary. Nothing ever happened here. Nothing ever changed. The humans just worked and slept and worked some more. Sometimes Greth wondered if they even remembered what it was like to be free. Sir, we're getting some strange readings, said one of his sensor operators, a young technician named Vross. Greth sighed. Define strange. Power fluctuations across the system. Nothing major. Just little blips on multiple monitoring stations. Probably equipment failures. Then file a maintenance request and stop bothering me. But Vross looked worried. Sir, the timing is odd. All the fluctuations happened within the same 30-second window. Greth turned to look at him. All of them? At exactly the same time? Yes, sir. For the first time in years, Greth felt a cold touch of concern. Simultaneous failures across an entire solar system didn't happen naturally. He stood up and walked to the sensor station. Show me the locations. Vross pulled up a map. Red dots appeared across the display, marking every place where they had lost sensor contact. Earth, Mars, Luna, Europa, Titan, the asteroid belt, every major human settlement. Sir, I think that was when the alarm started screaming. Captain Kim Dae-ho sat in the pilot seat of the UNS Retribution, watching his targeting computer paint the Velcran station in red. Around him, invisible to enemy sensors, 50 human warships held position. They had been drifting here for 3 days, their systems running cold, waiting for this exact moment. All ships report ready, said his communications officer. Dae-ho took a deep breath.
12 years of waiting.
12 years of planning. 12 years of rage building like pressure in a sealed container. Now finally it was time to let it out. "Execute Operation Silence," he said quietly. 50 ships powered up their weapons at the same instant. The darkness lit up with targeting lasers and missile locks. The Velcrans had maybe 5 seconds to realize what was happening before their world ended. The Retribution fired first. A single shot from their new plasma cannon, using technology the Velcrans had never imagined humans could possess. It punched through the station's shields like paper and exploded inside the command center. Lieutenant Greth had just enough time to see death coming. Then there was only fire and void. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, there were no Velcran survivors. No emergency beacons. No escape pods, nothing. "Target destroyed," Deho's weapons officer reported. Her voice was shaking, but whether from fear or excitement he couldn't tell. "Move to secondary targets," Deho ordered. "Every Velcran installation in the system. Every soldier, every ship, every base. They all die today." Across the solar system, the plan unfolded like clockwork. On Mars, Velcran barracks exploded as hidden charges detonated simultaneously. On Luna, a Velcran supply depot was destroyed by missiles that had been launched from Earth 15 minutes earlier. In the asteroid belt, mining stations that the aliens thought were empty suddenly revealed hidden weapons. Commander Kang Sora led the attack on the Velcran fuel depot near Jupiter. Her ship, the UNS Phantom, was painted black and moved like a shadow. The Velcrans never saw her coming. "Fire at will," she told her crew. The depot held enough fuel to power the Velcran garrison for 10 years. It also burned very, very well. The explosion was visible from Mars, a brief new star in the darkness. Kang watched it burn and felt nothing. No joy, no satisfaction, no regret, just cold calculation. One target eliminated. Moving to the next, Yoon Tae-hyung's intelligence network activated their final protocol. Every human who had been working undercover for the Velcrans received the same message. Storm. On Earth. In Velcran administrative buildings and military compounds, human workers who had seemed so weak and compliant suddenly weren't. Doors that should have been locked opened mysteriously. Security systems failed. Weapons that should have been locked away were suddenly accessible. The Velcrans died confused. They had trusted these humans. These weak, defeated, broken humans who had served them so faithfully for 12 years. How could they suddenly become dangerous? They never got to ask that question out loud. Park Ji-woo was in her office when it happened. She had made sure to schedule a meeting with Administrator Grohl that morning, keeping him in the building when the attack began. He was sitting across from her complaining about something trivial when the explosion started. Grohl jumped to his feet. "What's happening?" Ji-woo stood up slowly. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out something the Velcrans had thought was destroyed 12 years ago. A human pistol. "We're happening," she said and shot him. Later she would feel guilty about how good it felt. But not now. Now there was work to do. She stepped over Grohl's body and walked to the communications center. The human technicians there had already taken control of the systems. She sat down and began composing a message that would be broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Admiral Lee Hee-jin watched the operation unfold from her command center on Titan. Every screen showed a different battle, a different Velcran target being eliminated. The plan was working even better than she had hoped. "Admiral, we have confirmation," said her operations officer. "All primary targets destroyed. All secondary targets destroyed. No Velcran survivors detected anywhere in the system." Lee nodded. 12 years of planning, and it had taken less than a day to execute. The Velcrans had been so confident, so comfortable in their superiority that they never saw the trap closing around them. "Status on the perimeter?" she asked. "All deep space sensors show negative contact. No Velcran ships within 20 light years. We're clear." "Good. Signal Captain Kim to begin broadcast protocol." On the bridge of the Retribution, Daeho received the order. He nodded to his communications officer who patched through Park Ji-woo's message. It was time for humanity to stop being silent. Park Ji-woo's face appeared on every communication channel in the galaxy. She looked older than she had 12 years ago, with lines around her eyes and gray in her hair. But her voice was steady and her eyes were cold. "Velcran Dominion," she began. "For 12 years you have occupied our system. For 12 years you have treated us as slaves. For 12 years you believed we were defeated." She paused, letting that sink in. "You were wrong." The broadcast switched to footage of the attacks. Velcran stations exploding, Velcran ships burning, Velcran soldiers dying, all in perfect coordination, all executed with surgical precision. You mistook our silence for acceptance, Jiwoo continued. You mistook our patience for weakness. You forgot that humanity has one particular talent we remember. We remember every insult, every humiliation, every threat, and we prepare. The footage changed again, showing humanity's new warships, fast, deadly, equipped with technology that matched or exceeded anything the Velcrans possessed. The Sol system is now a fortress. Any Velcran vessel that enters our territory will be destroyed without warning or mercy. You will leave us alone. You will tell the galaxy what happens when you push humans into a corner. Jiwoo leaned forward, and for just a moment she let her mask slip. Let the galaxy see the anger that had been building for 12 years. We are not your slaves. We are not your subjects. We are not your victims. We are humanity, and we will never bow to you again. The broadcast ended. For a moment, the solar system was quiet. Every human held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then slowly people began to celebrate. On Earth, in the streets where Velcran soldiers had walked just hours ago, humans came out of their homes and looked up at the sky. Free. Finally. Truly free. Captain Kim Dae-ho sat in his chair and closed his eyes. He thought about his ship, the one the Velcrans had destroyed 12 years ago. He thought about all the people who had worked in secret, sacrificing everything for this moment. He thought about how close they had come to defeat. But they hadn't been defeated. They had been patient. And patience, it turned out, was humanity's greatest weapon. Commander Kang Sora ordered her fleet to take up defensive positions around Earth. The Velcrans would respond eventually. They had to. You couldn't destroy an entire garrison without consequences. But humanity was ready now. They had bought themselves time, and they had used that time well. When the Velcrans came back, they would find a very different enemy than the one they had conquered 12 years ago. Admiral Lee Heejin allowed herself a small smile. The first phase was complete. Now came the hard part, making sure humanity stayed free. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, after 12 years of silence, humanity had finally spoken, and the galaxy was listening. The Velcran High Command received Park Ji-woo's broadcast in complete silence. For 5 full minutes, nobody in the war room spoke. They simply stared at the screen showing their destroyed garrison, their burning ships, their dead soldiers, Supreme Commander Thraken, the same alien who had accepted Earth's surrender 12 years ago, slammed his fist on the table hard enough to crack the metal. Impossible, he growled. Those primitives had nothing. No technology, no weapons, no capability. How did they hide an entire fleet from us? They didn't hide it, sir, said one of his intelligence officers, a female Velcran named Resh. They built it. While we were watching them mine ore and grow food, they were building warships in places we never thought to look. Thraken's 4 eyes narrowed. Then we will teach them what happens when slaves forget their place. Prepare the 4th battle fleet, 100 warships. I want Earth reduced to glass. Sir, perhaps we should consider... Consider what? Thraken roared. They killed 300 of our soldiers. They destroyed Imperial property. They made us look weak in front of the entire galaxy. We will crush them completely. The 4th battle fleet departed Velcran space 3 days later. 100 warships, each one capable of destroying cities from orbit. It was more than enough firepower to conquer an entire system, let alone one small planet. Captain Bae-jun watched them come from the bridge of the UNS Ghost Protocol. His ship was humanity's newest creation, equipped with stealth technology so advanced that it could hide in plain sight. The Velcran fleet passed within 1,000 kilometers of his position and never detected him. They're heading straight for Earth, said his sensor officer. No formation changes, no scouts sent ahead. They're just charging in like we're still helpless. Bae-jun smiled coldly. Good. Overconfidence killed their garrison. Let's see if it works twice. Send the signal. Across the solar system, human forces received the same message. They're coming. Admiral Lee Hyejin reviewed the tactical display one more time. The Velcran fleet would reach Neptune's orbit in 6 hours. That's where humanity would make its stand, far from Earth, where any damage would fall on empty space instead of populated planets. Are we ready? She asked Commander Kang Sora, who had been promoted to overall fleet commander after the liberation. Kang nodded. Every ship is in position. They won't see us until it's too late. And if we lose, then Earth activates Protocol Exodus. We evacuate who we can and scatter to the colonies. But we won't lose, Admiral. We've trained for this. Lee wanted to believe her. But the Velcrons had 100 warships to humanity's 75. Even with superior technology and the element of surprise, the battle would be close. Han Nari sat in the Strategic Defense Command Center, watching the same display. She was humanity's lead tactician, the person who had spent 2 years planning exactly how to fight a fleet battle against a superior force. "Remember the doctrine," she said to the officers around her. "We don't try to win a fair fight. We make it unfair. Swarm tactics, hit and run, deny them any chance to learn or adapt. Every Velcran ship that survives carries information back to the Dominion. So none survive." The Velcran fleet entered the outer solar system in a tight formation, shields raised, weapons charged. They expected to find scattered human resistance, maybe a few desperate ships making a last stand. Instead, they found nothing. Empty space. Distant stars, silence, where are they? Demanded Fleet Commander Greth the Elder, cousin to the lieutenant who had died in the initial attack. "Scan the entire system. They can't hide an entire fleet. Sir, sensors show nothing. No ships, no stations, no." The first missile struck before the sensor officer could finish his sentence. It appeared from nowhere, materialized out of empty space like a ghost, and slammed into the shields of the lead cruiser. The shields held, but barely. Then came the second missile, and the third. And then dozens more, all appearing from different directions, all striking different targets. "Evasive action," Greth shouted. "All ships spread out. Find those humans and destroy them." But spreading out was exactly what humanity wanted. Beijun's Ghost Protocol decloaked for just 3 seconds, long enough to fire a full missile barrage at a Velcran destroyer, then disappeared again. By the time the Velcrans turned their weapons toward his position, he was already gone. This was the new human doctrine: strike hard, strike fast, and never stay visible long enough to be targeted. Like sharks in dark water, circling a wounded whale, Captain Kim Dae-ho led his squadron in a coordinated attack on the Velcran left flank. 5 human ships decloaked simultaneously, fired everything they had at a single target, then vanished before the return fire could hit them. The Velcran heavy cruiser broke apart in a ball of flame. "Target destroyed," reported his weapons officer. "Moving to next attack position." "Make it quick," Dae-ho said. "They're adapting faster than we expected." He was right. The Velcrans were veterans of 1,000 battles, and they weren't complete fools. Greth the Elder ordered his ships into a defensive sphere, overlapping their shields and sensor coverage. It was harder to hide when enemies were looking in every direction at once, but humans had planned for this too. Commander Kang Sora watched the Velcran formation change and smiled. They thought tightening up would protect them. Instead, it just made them a better target. "Release the mines," she ordered. Hundreds of small objects that had been floating dormant in Neptune's orbit suddenly activated. They weren't sophisticated weapons, just simple explosive devices with basic guidance systems. But there were so many of them, and they were so close, that the Velcrans never had a chance to shoot them all down. The first wave hit the Velcran formation like a hammer. Shields that were already weakened by constant hit-and-run attacks failed completely. Armor cracked. Ships began venting atmosphere and crew into the void. "Now," Kang shouted. "Full assault." 75 human warships decloaked all at once, surrounding the Velcran fleet in a sphere of their own. At this range, stealth didn't matter. What mattered was raw firepower, and humanity had plenty of that. The battle turned into a brutal slugging match. Velcran ships were tough with thick armor and powerful weapons. They destroyed 3 human vessels in the first minute, then 5 more in the second. But humans were faster, more maneuverable, better coordinated. Every Velcran ship faced attacks from multiple angles. Every time they targeted one human vessel, 2 more would attack from behind. It was like fighting a swarm of angry bees. Nam Junho led his Marine orbital drop forces in the most dangerous mission of the battle. His team used small assault pods to board damaged Velcran ships, fighting their way through corridors to destroy them from the inside. It was brutal. Close quarters combat against enemies that were bigger and stronger than humans. But humans were meaner, and humans had spent 12 years learning how to kill Velcrans very efficiently. The battle lasted 18 hours. In the end, 97 Velcran ships were destroyed. 3 escaped badly damaged and fleeing toward Dominion space at maximum speed. "Should we pursue?" asked Kang's tactical officer. She shook her head. No, let them go. Ma'am? They'll report everything they saw. The Dominion will know exactly what we're capable of. Good, Kang said coldly. I want them to know. I want them to be afraid. The 3 Velcran survivors limped home carrying a message that would change the galaxy. They reported weapons that could punch through Velcran shields. They reported stealth technology that made ships invisible. They reported tactics that turned numerical superiority into a disadvantage. Most importantly, they reported that humans had changed. The broken, defeated species that had surrendered 12 years ago was gone. In its place was something dangerous. On the bridge of the lead survivor ship, Commander Greth the Elder composed his final report. His hands were shaking. He had lost 97 ships. 97 ships against a species they thought was primitive. When he finally made it home, he went directly to Supreme Commander Thraken and delivered his message in person. Sir, Greth said quietly, we need to leave them alone. Thraken stared at him. What, the humans, sir? We need to leave them alone. They're not the species we conquered anymore. They're something else, something we can't afford to fight. You lost to primitives and now you counsel surrender? No, sir. I counsel survival. We can beat them if we commit enough ships, enough resources, enough soldiers. But it will cost us everything. And while we're fighting humans, our other enemies will see weakness. Thraken wanted to argue, wanted to order another fleet, a bigger one, to destroy Earth once and for all. But Greth was right. The Dominion had other threats, other border wars. They couldn't afford to waste resources on one stubborn species. They'll pay for this eventually, Thraken muttered. Perhaps, sir. But not today. Captain Kim Dae-ho received the all-clear signal 12 hours later. The Velcrans were gone. No more ships in range. No more threats detected. He sat back in his command chair and realized his hands were shaking. They had won. Against impossible odds, against a superior force, humanity had won. But he knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. 3 months after the Battle of Neptune, Park Ji-woo stood in front of representatives from 7 different alien species. None of them were Velcran. They had all come to Earth secretly, risking everything to meet with humanity. You destroyed an entire Velcran fleet, said the first representative, a tall being with blue skin and too many arms. Its species was called the Marani, and they had been under Velcran control for 30 years. How? Ji-woo smiled. We prepared. We waited. We learned. The Velcrans thought our silence meant defeat. It meant patience. Ma, could you teach us? Asked another representative, this one short and covered in fur. The Talric people had been conquered 50 years ago. Could we learn to do what you did? That depends, Ji-woo said carefully. What are you willing to fight for? The Marani representative leaned forward. Freedom, dignity, the right to exist without masters, the same things you fought for. And that was how it began. Humanity didn't set out to build an alliance. But the galaxy had watched them defeat the Velcrans, and suddenly every oppressed species wanted to know their secret. Oseojun became Earth's first galactic ambassador. He was young, only 35, but he understood something important. Humanity couldn't stay isolated forever. They needed allies, trading partners, and friends. The galaxy was too big and too dangerous to face alone. We're not looking to build an empire, Seojin explained to the assembled representatives. We're offering something different. An alliance of equals, the Free Systems Coalition. No species rules another. Every member keeps their independence. But if one of us is attacked, all of us respond. The first 5 species joined within a month. The Velcran Dominion watched nervously as their empire began to crack. Species that had been loyal for decades suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. Within the Velcran High Command, there was panic. Supreme Commander Thraken called an emergency meeting. We need to crush this rebellion before it spreads, he said. If we let these species break away, the entire Dominion will collapse. But his officers looked worried. They had lost over 400 ships in human space. Their military was stretched thin. Their reputation for invincibility was shattered. Perhaps, suggested one brave admiral, we should consolidate. Focus on holding our core systems. Let the outer regions go, Thraken glared at him. Never, we do not retreat. We do not compromise. But the galaxy was changing whether Thraken liked it or not. The Free Systems Coalition grew to 10 members, then 15, then 20. Each one brought new technology, new resources, new perspectives. Humanity shared what they had learned about fighting the Velcrans, and in return they gained knowledge about faster-than-light navigation. advanced medicine, and alien engineering. Captain Shin Yuna commanded the UNS Vanguard, humanity's first exploration vessel designed for long-range missions beyond Coalition space. Her mission was to find new allies and new worlds that might want to join the growing alliance. She was 4 months into her journey when she discovered something remarkable. A species called the Koran, who had never been contacted by any galactic power. They were peaceful, advanced in arts and science, but militarily weak. "We've heard rumors of the Velkrans," the Koran leader told her. "We've been hiding, hoping they never find us." Yuna shook her head. "You don't have to hide anymore. Join the Coalition. We protect our own." The Koran were the first species to join the Coalition without being conquered first. They wouldn't be the last. Back on Earth, Quan Jiho oversaw the establishment of humanity's first colonies outside the Sol system. Not just outposts or mining stations, but real colonies. Places where humans could build lives and raise families without fear. But every colony was also a fortress. Humanity had learned their lesson. They would never be caught unprepared again. Every settlement had hidden defenses, emergency evacuation plans, and the ability to fight back if attacked. "We're not empire builders," Jiho explained to his staff. "But we're not victims either. Every colony we establish makes humanity harder to destroy. Every ally we gain makes war against us more expensive. We're building a network of mutual survival." 5 years after the Battle of Neptune, the Free Systems Coalition included 37 species across 40 systems. The Velkran Dominion had shrunk to half its former size. Species that had once feared the Velkrans now openly defied them. Admiral Lee Hyejin, now 77 years old and officially retired, watched the news broadcast from her home on Titan. She saw human ships flying alongside alien vessels. She saw species that had once been enemies now working together. She saw something she had never expected to see in her lifetime. Peace. Not perfect peace. There were still tensions, still conflicts. The Velkrans still made threatening noises from their shrinking territory. Pirates and raiders caused problems on the frontier. But it was better than war. Better than slavery. Captain Kim Dae-ho visited her one evening. He was older too, his hair completely gray, but he still moved like a fighter. "They want me to give a speech," he told the admiral. "At the memorial ceremony. 20 years since the surrender. Will you?" she asked. "I don't know what to say. That we were lucky? That we could have lost? That everything we did was built on a gamble?" Lee smiled. "Tell them the truth. That humanity survived because we were willing to be patient, because we understood that sometimes the best way to fight is to wait for the right moment." The memorial ceremony was held on Earth, in the same building where Park Ji-woo had accepted the Velkran surrender 20 years ago. Thousands of people attended, humans and aliens together. Dae-ho stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. He saw veterans who had fought in the secret war, young people who had been born after the liberation, alien delegates who had joined the coalition. 20 years ago, he began, we made a choice. We could fight and die with pride or bow our heads and wait for a chance to live. We chose to live. We chose to be patient, and that choice saved us. He paused, letting the words sink in. The Velkrans thought our silence meant we had nothing to say. They were wrong. Our silence meant we were listening, learning, building, waiting for the moment when we could speak with a voice they couldn't ignore. The crowd was completely quiet. Today we remember the people who worked in secret, who built ships in hidden factories, who smiled at their oppressors while planning their defeat, who sacrificed their pride so that humanity could survive. He looked down at his notes, then pushed them aside. The words came from his heart now, not from a prepared speech. We were told we were weak. We were told we were defeated. We were told to accept our place as slaves, but we refused to believe them. We knew something they didn't, that humans never give up. We just get quiet and figure out a better plan. Applause started slowly, then built like a wave. But Dae-ho wasn't finished. The Velkrans learned a lesson 20 years ago. The galaxy is learning it now. Never mistake patience for weakness. Never assume silence means acceptance, and never ever give humans time to prepare. Park Ji-woo was in the audience watching her old friend speak. She was 72 now, her hair white, but her eyes were still sharp. She had lived through the surrender, the silent years, the liberation and the building of the coalition. She had seen humanity at its lowest and its highest. After the ceremony, A young human reporter asked her what she thought humanity's legacy would be. Jiwoo considered the question carefully. "I think," she said slowly, "that we'll be remembered as the species that refused to stay defeated. Other species might be stronger or smarter or more advanced, but humans are the ones who wait and watch and learn and then strike when you least expect it. Is that something to be proud of?" The reporter asked. "Survival is always something to be proud of." Commander Kang Sora retired from military service and became an instructor at the new Coalition Defense Academy. She taught young officers from a dozen different species the same lessons humanity had learned: patience, preparation, and the importance of never underestimating your enemy. The Velcrons made one critical mistake, she told her students. They thought technology and numbers were enough. But warfare isn't just about having the best weapons. It's about having the will to use them. It's about strategy and patience and knowing when to strike. One of her students, a young Mirani, raised a tentacle. "But how do you develop that kind of patience? How do you wait for years when you want to fight now?" Kang smiled. "You remember what you're fighting for. Not revenge, not glory, but survival. When you're fighting for survival, you can wait as long as it takes." 50 years after the surrender, Park Ji-woo died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 102. Her funeral was attended by representatives from every coalition species. The memorial service lasted 3 days. On the last day, they played her final message, recorded a month before her death. Her face appeared on screens across the coalition, old and tired, but still strong. "We were underestimated once," she said. "We will ensure it never happens again, not through arrogance or aggression, but through preparation. Let our silence be our strength and our patience be our weapon." She paused, and for just a moment the old fire returned to her eyes. To any species listening, whether your friend or enemy, remember this: humanity does not forget. We don't forgive easily, but we do survive, and we make sure that anyone who pushes us down regrets giving us time to stand back up. The message ended. Across the coalition, humans and aliens alike stood in silence, honoring the woman who had helped save humanity and build something better from its ashes. Captain Kim Dae-ho lived to be 115. On his deathbed, surrounded by grandchildren who had never known slavery or defeat, he smiled. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." Admiral Lee Hee-jin had passed away 10 years earlier at the age of 107. Her last words were simpler: "Never again." The Free Systems Coalition continued to grow. The Velcron Dominion continued to shrink. Humanity established colonies on 50 worlds and built trading relationships with hundreds of species. But every human child learned the story of the silent years. They learned about the surrender, the patience, the secret preparation, and the sudden, devastating revenge. They learned that sometimes the best way to win is to wait, to be patient, to let your enemy think they've won while you prepare for the real fight. They learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or weapons or numbers. It was the ability to endure, to remember, and to never stop preparing for the next battle. And most importantly, they learned that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's just humans being very, very patient. The galaxy learned that lesson too, and they never forgot it,